Greetings and thanks for joining us again. My name is Carlos Salinas, and I'm the Regional Director for the U.S. Soybean Export Council in the Americas. A pleasure to have you with us. I hope you had a very happy Easter, enjoyed it with your family and friends. Before we get started, I'd like to remind you that this presentation is designed for USEC's key customers like you and for USEC's internal purposes. Please continue to send us your feedback. We like to hear from you on how we can improve this presentation. Before we get started, and as we always do, we like to recognize USEC's membership. Within this membership, which is very wide and diverse, we have soybean processors, soybean exporters, seed companies, equipment manufacturers, railroads, surveyors, brokers, among many other important stakeholders and funding sources. And we never forget the support and contribution that we receive from the U.S. Soybean farmer. Without that support, this presentation would not be possible. We have a brief agenda today. We want to talk about U.S. weather, always important, sometimes more important than other times, but always important. We want to talk about soybean meal exports. Also, we want to address some of the changing flows that we've seen due to the situation in the Panama Canal. And we do want to talk about implied volatility, that is the market's valuation or perception of future price swings. We want to share some interesting data with you because that impacts certainly the price for insurance, if you want to buy it or if you want to sell insurance. It does have an impact on the price of options, obviously. So let's move on to weather. I think the good news is that when we talked to you 2 weeks ago, we had about 33% of the U.S. Soybean production area experiencing some sort of drought. As of the report of March 26 from the USDA, that number has reduced to 21%. So it looks like we've seen good precipitation, certainly over the past couple of weeks, helping that situation. We still have some areas of concern, while still early, really, to get deeply concerned, but we do have some areas of concern on the seasonal drought outlook. That we have areas in this brown spots right here that have persistent drought moving forward. So we'll have to monitor very closely. But over the past 30 days, I think most productive areas have certainly received some level of precipitation above the norm, which is great to see. However, in this map, I noticed something of interest, and I wanted to share with you, is this area, and that is Mexico's crop-producing area. I would say for really, it's a large part of Mexico nonetheless. So it impacts everything, not just corn or sorghum. But the reason I bring it to your attention is because we're going to have to watch this very closely. Let's keep in mind that Mexico is the the seventh largest corn producer with 24 million metric tons, and it is the fifth largest sorghum or milo producer with 4.3 million metric tons. So sum those two, you're talking about 28 million metric tons that are at risk. And certainly we are, in relative terms, a country like Argentina, for example, exports, 35 million metric tons of corn. So it does have a significant impact, and I'm sure Mexico is glad to have U.S. corn available, readily available, with great logistics to supply it on short notice, because coming this year, they may actually need it given the conditions. So we'll see. Again, it's early to kill a crop on weather or to make it on weather, but something that we'll continue to monitor very closely as we move forward, as it will impact not only corn flows, but it may increase the inclusion of meal as well. So we'll have to see how that plays out. Let's talk about U.S. soybean meal exports. And I think we've all heard of the large export numbers that we've seen. The latest data that we have from weekly export sales for the week ending March 21st, we can see that the soybean meal program out of the U.S., we have shipped close to 7 million metric tons already this year since October 1st, compared to about 6 million metric tons during the same time last year. So When we take a look at outstanding sales, we can see that outstanding sales have also increased by 16%, where we have outstanding commitments of 3.2 million metric tons, a significant increase, again, on shipments and on outstanding sales. What I find interesting is that when we add the accumulated exports of almost 7 million metric tons to the 3.2 million metric tons of commitments open remaining to be shipped, we have a program of about 10.2 million metric tons of U.S. meal that has shipped or it's committed, and that's about 3/4 of the soybean meal export program that we have for the year. So maybe we're going to have maybe we will exceed those 13.8 million metric tons. We'll see, but of an overall program. But it is great to see. Some of the regions, all the regions have shipped. For the exception of one, unfortunately, my region, but also most of the regions have increased their shipments of U.S. Soybean meal. What I find interesting is that certainly Southeast Asia has seen the greatest increases, with a big focus in the Philippines and Vietnam. Other countries have contributed as well in Southeast Asia, but we've seen exports to that region grow by 845,000 metric tons compared to last year. That's a significant uptick, an increase of 54%. And I think it's interesting to see how this will play out moving forward, and how customers react to Argentine meal coming up in, let's say, in March, April, as their harvest kicks in and some of those beans make it to their crushing plants and they begin their aggressive export program. We'll talk about quality in a second, and hopefully some of our customers are looking at those drivers as well. But again, keep that in the back of your mind. Let's talk about the Panama Canal, and we've seen interesting changes on the Panama Canal. So far this year, the U.S., I think, has adapted very well and used its diverse infrastructure to ship grain out of the PNW to Latin America. Now, most of you know that going back very recently, that's a highly unusual flow. Generally, it doesn't play out because people rather ship from New Orleans, as you can, as you can access many markets through the Panama Canal in normal conditions very well. But we're beginning to see some of those flows out of the PNW, and I think it's interesting that we have, I've counted the numbers, I think it's 17 vessels since the beginning of the year that have shipped out of the PNW to Guatemala, Colombia, Chile, El Salvador, Nicaragua, and so forth. Now, you may not see soybean meal here. That is because in this set of data, they don't track soybean meal, and I apologize for that. But be assured that soybean meal typically goes along with corn and it's loads with other commodities as well. Another change that we've seen impacting our customers, particularly in Ecuador, as you know, Ecuador being on the Pacific side of South America, the natural flow is to go through the Panama Canal. But if you don't have that option, it becomes very challenging. And I took the liberty to analyze the lineups in Argentina of soybean meal only going to Ecuador. And I was maybe not surprised, but I would say maybe slightly disappointed to see that we have seen since January close to 327,000 metric tons of soybean meal from Argentina and Bolivia shipped or planned to be shipped to Ecuador. Now, that covers obviously a great part of that demand, and that tells you that, yes, in Ecuador, the U.S. is beginning to lose its market share due to the situation in the Panama Canal. And certainly when customers are making these decisions, same thing as they will make those decisions in maybe Vietnam or those decisions in Indonesia or the Philippines, I think it's important that customers know that the latest data that we have from Evonik, not USAC generated, that talks about digestibility of soybean meal. That is the protein that is actually available to the animal. That some of those indicators tell us that digestibility of Argentine soybean meal is at 67% of that protein available to the animal. When we compare it to the U.S., and we're talking about 77% of that protein available to the animal, right? It is an expensive product. You pay a lot for it. And it is key that when you make those decisions between origins, you actually understand, right, what those factors are. So you embed everything in that calculation before you pull the trigger. Also, another factor important to consider, which we'll address later on, is obviously uniformity or standard deviation on the quality factors, because that's also an important calculation to keep in mind. Let's move to soybean quality, because we do have some data on soybean quality. And I want to just compare with you an analysis. This is just Brazil versus Brazil. And I wanted to share some of the data that we've seen for February 23 compared to February 24. And as you will know, Brazil does, because of its weather conditions, always struggle a little bit with damage and heat damage, because beans are harvested generally in higher moisture content, and they tend to degrade a little faster than normal. Nonetheless, I mean, they have a great export program, good logistics, and a lot of their supply most of their supply ends up going to China. But I think what you have to keep in mind this year in Brazil is that when we compare the heat damage on February 23 compared to February 24, we see that the heat damage on those beans is actually more than double. For whatever the reason is, but we've seen that heat damage certainly increase. And we know that heat damage has a direct correlation with the digestibility of that soybean meal. Now, when we take a look at total damage, we see total damage has gone from 5.39 to 5.93. I would say that's mainly attributed probably to the increase on the heat damage. So again, something to keep in mind. It's our customers, I think, need to just make sure they do the right calculations when you make those decisions. I do want to talk a little about implied volatility. If you listen to the USEX webinar on the planting perspectives, our CEO, Jim Sutter, talk about risk, talk about volatility. And I think it's one of those things that we have to keep in mind and work closely with our risk management teams or with our broker experts that can guide you in this particular process. When we talk about implied volatility, I'm not talking about historical volatility. I'm talking about the market's valuation of volatility, and how we get that valuation is through the price of the options. That's how the market determines implied volatility, and it's basically the market's valuation on what those future price swings are going to look like. And it doesn't tell you that prices are going to go down or they're going to go up. It tells you what the valuation of those future swings. I think it's an interesting calculation, and it's certainly something that you need to consider, particularly talking closely with your risk management teams or consultants. Now, when you take a look at implied volatility, let's give you a little historical background. We go back to, let's say, close to June of 2021 for soybeans. Implied volatility was at 33%, right? And that means the market expected very wide swings, and was valuing options with a perception of very wide swings in prices. We are today sitting at 18.6%, which in relative terms, it's a lot lower than that 33.5. And it tells you that from a price of insurance, or the cost of those options, today are a lot cheaper compared to what they were in June of 2021, for maybe very obvious reasons. But the data tells you that those options are certainly a lot cheaper, and they're at the lower range over the past, let's say, since 2021. When we take a look at soybean meal, we see a similar situation where implied volatility, let's say in 2022, had 32%. Today we're at 24%. Again, indicating that the price of those options, the price of that insurance, whether you're buying it or whether you're selling it, is actually lower than before. And again, it may be for due reasons, but that's how the market is valuing it. We cannot say it's wrong or right. It's just the market valuation. You can buy it or you can sell it, I guess. But I think something that drew my attention is I did a calculation, and I normalized volatility. I normalized this at basically at 0, and I put a date of April 1st. And I looked at that evolution all the way through July 1st, right? So basically trying to say what's going to happen to volatility over the next, from April 1st all the way to July 1st. What's going to be what can we expect based on history? Again, I'm not telling you what's going to happen in the future. This is just simply what history has told us. And I found interesting that 93% of the time, right, implied volatility increases in this time window, right? So if you believe or you're thinking of buying insurance for your company, right? This may be actually a good time to have the discussion with your expert, with your broker. And if you need a broker, let us know. We have some very good members in our organization that can assist you in this process, top of the line. And but certainly, if you're thinking about taking buying insurance and protecting your company against prices going up or prices going down, hey, it seems that the timing might be just right to have those discussions with your brokers. When you take a look at soybean meal, in this particular case, we see also that over the past 15 years, 87% of the time, actually implied volatility has increased. Maybe it's a time window. Maybe it's because we're entering spring planting, weather conditions are beginning to impact, but certainly volatility tends to increase, right? So we see more risk moving forward. We're not telling you it's going to go down. We're not telling you the price will go down, will go up. We're just saying that it's going to get riskier, and the market values volatility a lot higher when we move forward. So again, if you're looking at taking some price protection, this timing might be actually ideal to begin doing so. Again, I hope this information that we share with you is valuable. I don't mean to take too much of your time. We appreciate all the feedback, and we hope you have a great week, and hopefully we'll talk in a couple of weeks. Take care.